Hi, my name's Sydney. This band behind me, they're called Good Bad Luck, and together we are ReachOut Psychosis. So we're a presentation put on by the BC Schizophrenia Society, and we go all over BC talking to high school age youth about early psychosis interventions. That's mental health, mental wellness, all that good stuff. But we're not going to spend an hour standing here lecturing you with boring facts. No, don't worry. We're going to keep it fun. We're going to keep it going with a little bit of audience participation, if you're into that. And oh, don't worry, if you don't know if you want to participate or not, well, you will when I tell you there are prizes for that participation. Yes, we all know that we love free stuff whenever someone comes to our school. And of course, we know that maybe you might be a little sleepy right now, maybe you just had lunch. Well, we're going to fix that. We're going to wake you up with some live music. So please put your hands together for Good Bad Luck.
Remember if it's been so long since I passed the test with my colors, and it grades were such a comfort. And I'm staring straight into the void. I gambled all I've got a night career and making noise and trying to listen to my inner voice. What if I'm doing this wrong? Am I supposed to feel like this? I think I'm doing this wrong. I think I'm doing this wrong. I think I'm doing this wrong. Am I supposed to feel like this? I think I'm doing this wrong. I think I'm doing this wrong. I'm so good at making bad choices. I'm so good at making bad choices. I'm so good at making bad choices. And now I am a cautionary tale. What if I got it all wrong? What if I made a mess of this? What if I got it all wrong? What if I got it all wrong? What if I got it all wrong? I'm so bad at this, I quit. What if I got it all wrong? What if I got it all wrong? I'm so good at making bad choices. I'm so good at making bad choices. I'm so good at making bad choices. Now I am a cautionary tale. Stay in school, play by the rules. Don't you wanna condo with the eyes of the fool? I think I'm doing this wrong. I think I'm doing this wrong. Am I supposed to feel like this? I think I'm doing this wrong. I think I'm doing this wrong. Am I supposed to feel like this? Sure. Cool. So that song was called Cautionary Tale, and I wrote it about the time when I was in high school and right after high school, when all of these things were happening to me that I was talking about before, like I couldn't get out of bed. I felt like when I was walking through quicksand. I was a straight A student, and suddenly I couldn't go to university because I could barely move. But everybody just thought I was really lazy. And I thought so myself as well, because I didn't know what was going on. A lot of people said that they were really disappointed in me. And so I took that on for a long time. I felt like a disappointment. I felt like a cautionary tale. This is what happens when a good student just ends up being really lazy. Of course, I didn't know at the time that I had bipolar disorder that wasn't treated. And so it's really important that when you are experiencing these kinds of things, you go easy on yourself, because it's not easy to live life with a mental illness.
Okay, so there are 3 symptoms that we call psychosis. So the first symptom and the most common symptom are hallucinations. And the most common of the 3 types of hallucinations is an auditory hallucination. So that's hearing something that isn't actually there. So that could be hearing voices or music, or it could be hearing other sounds. The second type of hallucination is a visual hallucination. So that's seeing something that isn't actually there. So that could be seeing people or animals, or it could be seeing other shapes or colors. The third type of hallucination is a tactile hallucination. So that's the feeling of something that isn't actually there. So that could feel like bugs crawling on or under your skin, or like a jolt of electricity rushing through your body. Now, these hallucinations are not to be confused with the things that we've all experienced at some point in our lives. So you've probably been walking down the hallway and thought you heard someone call your name and no one was there. Or maybe you're waking up in the morning and you thought you heard your mom call you from downstairs, but she never actually called you. Those things are pretty common and we've all experienced them. But the hallucinations that we're talking about today are much more serious and they're much more ongoing.
The second symptom associated with psychosis is paranoia. And paranoia is defined as an irrational fear or suspicion. So that's when someone is afraid of something that other people typically wouldn't be afraid of. So that could be thinking that your food is poisoned, or that your friends and family are conspiring against you, or even that people can listen in on your thoughts.
And the third symptom we call psychosis are delusions. And delusions are false, fixed beliefs. So they're when someone believes in something really intently that can easily be proven wrong. So you've probably heard the term delusions of grandeur. That's when someone thinks they've been put on this earth for a very grandiose purpose. So examples of this could be thinking a celebrity has a message for you, and only you, that they're trying to communicate to you somehow. Or there was a case of an Olympic rower, and he was found on a rooftop naked, and he said he was waiting for aliens to come decode his DNA. Now, that might sound silly to you or to me, but to him, that was entirely real because that delusion had become his entire reality. Now, when we talk about all 3 of these symptoms, we're not saying these things to scare you, because just like having a headache doesn't necessarily mean you have a brain tumor, experiencing one of these things doesn't necessarily mean you're really sick, but they could be indicators that something serious is going on. So it's really important that if you notice any of these things in yourself, or if you notice major behavioral changes in friends or family members, that you talk to an adult that you trust about it as soon as possible. Another thing that's important to remember is that when psychosis occurs, physical damage can be done to the brain. Now, psychosis shows itself between the ages of 16 and 24, and that's when your brain is super malleable because it's still developing. And that's a good thing because you can learn languages and instruments really easily, but there obviously is a downside, and it's that it can be damaged way more easily. But don't worry, there is good news. And it's that the human brain is incredible and it can heal itself, but it's only when those psychosis symptoms are under control. And that's through treatment. And sometimes that treatment can involve medication as well. So it's really important to spot those signs as soon as possible so someone can start to heal as soon as possible.
Okay, so now that you know all about the symptoms of psychosis, you're probably wondering, how likely is it for this to actually happen? So by show of hands, who here knows someone who has type 1 diabetes? Okay, that's a lot of hands. So it might surprise you to know that psychosis is actually 6 times more common than type 1 diabetes. It's about 3% of the population will experience psychosis at some point in their life. And so let's say there's 400 people in this room right now. What is 3% of 400? Yeah? 12, that is correct. So I'm not saying that 12 of you will experience psychosis, but statistically, that is accurate.
Don't believe in God. I know there's a devil in me. That's what I told song was called Hospital Bed, and it was about the worst part of my bipolar depression and my bipolar mania, hypomania. So during this time, I would be very unpredictable. Sometimes, like I said earlier, it would be hard to get out of bed. Other times, I would be full of energy. I would go days without sleeping. And I became really, really unpredictable. My friends didn't know what to do. And it was around this time that I started self-medicating. So I didn't want to face the day with my chaotic brain. So instead, every morning when I'd wake up, I'd take a handful of sleeping pills, and then I'd sleep throughout the day. And I'd wake up and take another. And that was my routine for a little while. And I probably don't have to tell you that this is super dangerous. And I did end up in the hospital a couple of times. And unfortunately, around these times, I was having suicidal thoughts. And it's really important that we talk about these things because they often don't get talked about, yet they affect us in a big way. So, yes, my friend called the police. She was worried for my life, and I was so mad at her. But now I'm grateful because she's the reason why I'm here today presenting to you. So this song was at once feeling angry at the hospital and the nurses that kept me there and the police that brought me there, and at the same time feeling very, very excited that I actually have a second chance at life.
So we're going to do a demonstration in a moment to demonstrate how one person might experience psychosis and specifically experience hallucinations. So we're going to have one volunteer in the middle, and we're going to ask a volunteer to tell us about their day. It's very simple, doesn't have to be detailed, just tell us about what they've been doing today. But at the same time, we're going to have a bunch of other volunteers up here acting as the different hallucinations that they are experiencing. So first of all, on either side of them, we're going to have two people who are acting as auditory hallucinations, and those are the things that the person is hearing that aren't actually there. So they're going to be distracting the person by saying weird sounds or repeating their own voice back to them, anything that would be auditory and distracting. The person in front of them will be the visual hallucination, and that is a hallucination that is something they're seeing that isn't actually there. So that person's going to be as visually distracting as possible and really just trying to distract the person from what they're talking about. The person at the back will be the tactile hallucination. So that's the feeling of something that isn't actually there. So that person's going to be trying to poke their back and really physically distract the person from what they're talking about. As they're doing this demonstration, I'm going to ask the rest of you to think about two things. First of all, please notice the behavioral changes of our volunteer in the middle. Notice how it might be difficult for them to describe their day, and notice any other physical or vocal changes you might notice. Second of all, we might want to think about how it might feel to be in this position and what kind of emotions it might bring up for you if you were to experience all of these things happening to you that you had no control over.
So this morning I woke up and Jasper texted me and Sydney texted me and I was like, that's actually a nice massage, thank you. And then I woke up and I ate cereal. You don't have to apologize. I'm old enough to empathize. How did they get things so wrong? They'll still say that when I am gone. You never had to fight a war. I didn't have to grow up more. You didn't drink and I'm that I got. Both know this is not where Richard started. I know very well when you grew up it was hell. But you did your best and where you messed up, I won't try so hard to do it better, 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 better. Cause of you I think I know what I can do to make it better, 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 better. Cause of you, I think I know what I can do to make a wish you wouldn't leave. I don't have to make you see. I know you think that silence is blind, but this can't wait until you're dead. And never is a lost child. Never had your dreams run wild. I'm still alive because you helped. But now you need to help yourself. Appreciate the good things that I got. Both know this is not where it should start. I know very well when you grew up it was hell. But you did your best and where you messed up, I won't try so hard to do it better, 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 better. Cause of you I think I know what I can do to make it better, 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 better. So that song was called Better, and it's about my family history of mental illness. So earlier we were talking about genetic vulnerability, and I said I actually have a history of bipolar disorder in my family. Now, unfortunately, when you have a parent who has an undiagnosed mental illness, it can make things really difficult for the parent and the kid. And I'm sure some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a lot of us who feel sad for our parents that they didn't get the kind of help and the kind of information that we can get now. But also we feel really angry because we would have liked to have a safe childhood with a parent who was, doing well mentally. And so that song is really about how I want to take my genetic vulnerability, my family history of mental illness, and I want to make it better. So yes, my dad, for example, did better than his dad. My mom did better than her mom. And I'm going to do better than them. Because right now we're talking about mental illness. We can get it treated way easier. It's just way more accepted to talk about it. So I know that if I have kids, I'll be able to tell them right away what's going on, and I'll have already been on medication and been treated for my bipolar disorder, so it won't have to wreak havoc amongst my family. And yet I know that there's no perfect parent and that I will still make mistakes. And so I can always hope that my kids will do better than me.
For over a decade, ReachOut Psychosis has been traveling around the province, sharing life-saving medical information, educating youth, and working really hard to remove the stigma and remove the discrimination that surrounds mental illness in our province. The presentation incorporates music, comedy, interactive demonstrations, personal testimony, and up-to-date medical information to educate youth about psychosis and mental illness in general. My name is Sydney. I'm the MC and a presenter for ReachOut Psychosis, and I'm proud to say that we present ReachOut Psychosis to over 20,000 students every year in British Columbia. If you want more information as to how to book ReachOut Psychosis for your school, you can find more info on reachoutspsychosis.com.